today's workshop very similar to that to maximize the discussion and the interaction. When we get to that part, Carrie Clem, our manager of renewables and choice programs, will lead and facilitate an interactive discussion exploring the use cases. If you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask it or use the chat. We ask that if you use the chat for a general question, please be sure to choose panelists and attendees in the drop-down box so that everyone can see your question. Last, I'll note that once again, we're recording today's workshop and we'll post it to our website in the coming days. We'll also be submitting the PowerPoint slides we used today to the Minnesota Commission in our most recent hosting capacity analysis docket. We'll alert all of you via email when we make that filing, and we'll provide you a link to the filing on the state of Minnesota's eDocket site. I'll pause here for a moment and ask if anyone has any questions before we get started. All right, we'll jump right in. So our goals for today, like they've been in the last couple of sessions, are to get your feedback, input, and your perspective. I think we're all working toward increasing the efficiency and the value of the hosting capacity tools, and your feedback and input is very important to that process as we work with you to shape the hosting capacity roadmap to further integrate with the MNDIP interconnection process. So we're very much looking forward to your feedback, input, and perspective today. Next slide. We're going to start out with just some very brief introductions. We'll ask folks to say their name and their interest in today's topic. We'll do a very quick recap of the workshops that we've had to date so far in 2020, and then we're going to get into the current state and future potential features, your ideas and thoughts for potential integration improvements of getting the hosting capacity either to replace or augment or somehow play a role in various steps of the MNDIP interconnection process. So let's do some interaction here, get you talking. I'm just going to go down the list here that I see in Zoom of the attendees and ask you to just say your name and your priority around the hosting capacity analysis or why you're interested in today's session. And we have a couple of people on the phone. I'm going to save you for last. Brian? Brian Liddick? Maybe Brian's having some sound issues. I'll go to the next one. Doug?
Yeah, this is Doug from MRES. Just participating for general education and be able to share this with others.
Great, thank you, Doug. Courtney? Courtney might also be having some sound issues.
This is Brian. I could go now if
okay.
You can hear me.
Thank you, Brian.
Just in case anybody else is having a similar issue, I was listening on my speaker, but it had my microphone from my headset as the microphone, even though I didn't have it plugged in. So here I am.
Brian I feel Leidick.
Your pain. Brian Leidick, Interstate Renewable Energy Council Chief Regulatory Engineer. And I've participated in both the last phases of the MNDIP and TIIR process, and have been also engaging in California on their hosting capacity analysis integration with their interconnection rules. So hoping, we can look at potentially similar issues and hope I can support that.
Great, thank you, Brian. And I feel your pain on the sound issues. I feel like my input for listening and speaking changes throughout the day somehow by my computer all on its own. Okay, Courtney, I don't know if you've wanted to jump in here. Otherwise, we'll keep going and feel free to unmute and jump in. Isabel.
Hi, everyone. This is Isabel Ricker with Fresh Energy. I work on our regulatory team and similar to Brian, have been involved in the interconnection standards and TIIR update process and the hosting capacity tool development over the past few years. Well, I've only been doing it for about a year, but Fresh Energy's been involved since 2016 and working closely with IREC on those issues. And yeah, excited to talk with you all today about how to better integrate the hosting capacity with the interconnection process.
Happy to have you. Thank you, Isabel. Eddie, you're up.
Yeah, Eddie Nestigan with Nestigan Renewable Energies. And I'm just here to find out a little bit more about, or continue to find out more about the application process in general and getting my solar farms online and making sure I dot all the I's and cross all the T's.
Well, we're glad you could join us today. Thank you. Danielle?
Hi, yeah, this is Danielle DeMar from All Energy Solar, and sorry for my late joining. I'm excited to see what kind of opportunities the hosting capacity can do with getting projects through the queue.
All right, thank you for that. Jim York?
Yeah, my name is Jim Bjork. I work with Toronto Energy, and I'm just participating to stay on top of what's going on. And you guys always do a good job, so I look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Well, thank you for that. I'm glad you could be here. Martin?
Hi, this is Marty with Chinook Solar, and I'm just trying to work through some of these hosting capacities and MINDIP issues as they're having a major impact on our business, staff, and clients.
Thank you, Marty. Glad you could be here. Nicole?
Hi, this is Nicole from Nokomis Energy. I work as a development manager, and I'm here just trying to expand my knowledge.
Well, great. Glad you could be here. Matt Landy?
Hi, this is Matt Landy from the Minnesota Department of Commerce. We are participants in the regulatory process before the commission, and I'm here to observe and to learn. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Paula.
Hi, this is Paula Fitzgerald with Novel Energy Solutions. Work in the project development department, so we obviously interface with Xcel quite often. Just kind of want to make sure that we're staying aware of current changes and able to provide input. Also wanted to let you know, Courtney, whose name you had called earlier, just called me. She is on the call, but she's having audio issues. So
Okay.
she is also with Novel. So anyway.
Thank you for that. And Courtney, if you continue to have audio issues and you want to jump in, just type a chat and we'll be monitoring that as well. Okay, where did I leave off? Peter. Peter may be having audio issues also. Robert?
I'm sorry.
There he is.
I'm sorry, this is Peter. I thought the space bar was going to unmute me, but I had to click it. Apologies. Peter Tagland with Mencia. I'm a policy associate at the association, and I work on regulatory and legislative issues. I'm interested in the HCA for its ability to smooth out interconnection and make it more efficient for all parties involved.
I think we share that. Thank you for that. Robert.
Yes, good morning. Robert Jogish with Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. I'm the Director of Engineering and Policy Analysis. I've been a member of the Distributed Generation Work Group since the very beginning and all the technical work groups. And so I'm just keeping my eyes peeled on what's going on out there.
Okay, well, great. Glad you could be here today. Will?
Hi, this is Will Kenworthy with Vote Solar. I'm the Midwest Regulatory Director for Vote Solar, and just interested in helping to, facilitate, good hosting capacity policy and providing input and help and support wherever we can.
Okay, great. Steve.
Hello, this is Steve Coleman with Sundial Energy. Project manager with a developer of solar projects in Minnesota. Very interested in improving and learning the changes and growth of the IA process, and integrating of the HCA into it is a potential great improvement. I want to be around to see. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thank you. We look forward to your feedback. Yoki. Oh, Yoki might be having sound issues. We'll move ahead and then Yoki will come back. Kim? Also might be having sound issues. Did I miss anybody? All right. Well, we do have a few folks on as well from Xcel Energy. As I mentioned, Carrie Clem is on. She's our manager of renewable and choice programs. We have several folks on from our distribution engineering group, and we'll all kind of jump in as needed throughout the discussion and answer questions and perhaps dive more deeply into the feedback and questions that you're offering. So as I noted before, be on mute. We want this to be interactive, and if you're having sound issues or if you're more comfortable doing chat, go ahead and do that, and just be sure that you direct it to all attendees and panelists and attendees. Oh, it sounds like somebody maybe got unmuted here and wants to say something. Nope, not yet. All right, well, then I think we're going to go into our very first polling question. Oh, no, sorry about that. Well, I guess we are going to do it. And then I'll do the recap of our workshops to date. So I jumped the gun a little bit. All right, so we opened up a poll. Hopefully you see that on your screen and you can answer the questions. We're looking for you to respond with your interest in the hosting capacity and interconnection integration topic and your main reason for attending today. All right, we got people getting their votes in there.
Hi, this is Yoki. Was I able to unmute successfully?
We can hear you. Welcome, Yoki.
Okay, great. Hello. Yeah, sorry about those difficulties. As folks probably know, I'm with the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and along with Brian, happy to be here. So thanks.
Thank you, Yoki. Glad you got that resolved. All right, we still have responses flowing in. We're getting a pretty good look here at what the results are going to be. We're at about 77%. right, I think we're going to call it. Looks like we have a nice mix of folks on today's session and ready to provide feedback. About 40% are solar developers in the business side of things, but a nice mix of some technical and some advocacy and some regulatory oversight as well. And I think what we heard from everybody too, a lot of people are here to listen, learn, generate ideas. So I think these results are reflective of all of that. So thank you for that. All right, well now we'll just do a quick recap of the workshops that we've done so far in 2020, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Carrie, and we're gonna get going with diving more deeply into those use cases. So here's a view of the workshops that we've had so far in 2020. We had 3 of them, or I would say the first series in June. A lot of those looked at the technical capabilities and processes that we go through with the systems, the main systems that we use, Synergy and the EPRI Drive tool. We were lucky to have Matt Rylander from EPRI on with us during those as well, where we looked at criteria, inputs, thresholds, and just the way that those systems do the analysis. And then this series here in September is looking at those potential future use cases. So we started with just kind of setting that landscape, talking about the Commission's long-term goal that they set in our 2019 hosting capacity for it to integrate with, replace the fast track screens in the interconnection process. And then last week, we looked at use case 1 of having it remain an early indicator for the process. And today, we're going to dive more deeply into the MIN-DIP interconnection process and those various steps and use cases that are also going to be part of the analysis that we submit in November. So I think with that, we'll hand it over to Carrie, and she'll get us talking.
All right, good morning, everyone. So welcome to the interactive portion of the conversation, where we're going to start off by talking about pre-application reports. I'll just give you a little background on myself. I oversee the team that runs all of our renewable choice programs at Xcel Energy. And so I'm not a real deep expert on a lot of MIN-DIP. Running around kind of the 50% level in terms of how I see MIN-DIP, but we do have technical experts on the phone and process experts on the phone who can help us as we get into this if we have those more detailed questions. But a lot of what we'll try to tease out and talk about is really focusing on how the hosting capacity analysis can integrate into or help improve the different phases of the interconnection process. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Looking at the hosting capacity analysis in relation to MIN-DIP, you have the hosting capacity map on the left, and then you have a substation DGQ. And then our focus for today is talking about how those things integrate into and could help improve the pre-application data process, the application screening process, and the engineering study process. Also, please jump in along the way if you have conversation or questions that you want to share. This is a slide that you've seen before in these workshops. This is a high-level view of the MIN-DIP process and how it works. So you have your pre-application data report that occurs before you put in an application. And then this checkbox icon here represents the interconnection application. From there, it either goes into a fast track process through an initial screen, or it can go into a study process if we can tell right away that it's going to take an in-depth study. And then it travels through the supplemental screen process, goes into a facility study, which takes a deeper dive into the analysis and the design of the project. That takes a lot more time and a lot more effort compared to those earlier tracks. And in the end, the outcome is an interconnection agreement. So this just takes a quick look. I know this is a lot of data and it might be kind of small. Hopefully it's on your screen so you can lean in and see it a little bit. But this is what comes out of that pre-application report. This is an example report of what you would get when you put in a request for that pre-application report. Any users of these on the phone? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. I'm going to be calling on you guys, so you might just want to hang out off mute so that you're ready to go if you have thoughts or responses that jump into your minds. So thinking about this pre-application report and the data it provides, the process you go through to get it is today you request it online in an online application portal. And there's a $300 fee that's done through ePay, and it takes up to 15 business days to turn those around. There is a non-disclosure agreement that's required because the information you're getting is pretty sensitive system information, and it's considered highly confidential by our business. And then to submit it, it's based on the address or GPS coordinates you provide us, plus a photo or map that we can use to cross-reference to make sure that we're looking at the right spot. Sometimes these pre-application reports are for locations that don't have an address because they're brand new, and that's where those GPS coordinates can really come in handy. And then the photo or map really helps us make sure we're looking at exactly the right spot. In terms of what happens through this process, the application process, like I said, is all online and interactive. You can do that all on your own. You include the sitemap, the payment, and a signed agreement. And then we take that request as it comes in and we prepare the report. We compile the data from different sources. We take a look at the data, and then we finalize the report and send it back to you. And it's sent to you via email, and it's uploaded into the portal for future reference, so you'll always have that available to you. Thoughts, questions, comments there? All right, hearing none. This is part of the disclaimer that is part of this process. I think it's important to consider here because of the level of effort and data checking that goes into the pre-application reports. This is a $300 report. It's meant to be high level based off of the information readily available from the desktop and in our systems. It doesn't go through extensive checks of validation or any field review or things like that. So these are some of the caveats and limitations that come along with that pre-application report. So we're going to do another poll to learn a little bit more about who's using pre-application reports, how many do you do, and what do you anticipate that's going to look like in the next 2 to 5 years as we look at the growth case for interconnections. And then what is your top priority for pre-application reports? Thanks for taking a couple seconds here. We'll wait to see some responses come across. This is probably clear, but just to make sure, on-site refers to on-site solar. We used to call this solar rewards all the time, but now we're seeing a lot more that are net metered only, and so we're just calling it on-site solar to encompass all of those different options. All right, it seems like people are about done. If you want to pop up the
Carrie, it looks like in the chat, Paula is saying that she hasn't been able to respond other than chat. So she included information in the chat.
Okay. I don't really have a way to get that into the responses, but we'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Paula. All right, I'm going to stop the polling and share the results. Can you all see them? All right, it looks like no high frequency users to date. And a little, kind of a mixed bag of responses here in terms of how we anticipate using pre-application reports in the next 1 to 3 years. Looks like most people expect to stay about the same or increase by quite a bit. So that's good news. And top priority, overwhelming winner was accuracy. All right, good to know. Fast turnaround also got a couple of votes in there. Quick and easy to request. Cost and security, not as much of a concern. Good feedback, thank you. Okay, now we're gonna get into the discussion part. So take your mics off mute, please, and let's get ready to chat a little bit. I thought it would be great to hear direct from you stories, feedback. How do you use pre-application reports? For those of you who are users, looking to hear from you.
So at Novel Energy Solutions, we use them very regularly to determine whether there appears to be adequate capacity at certain locations, so that if we're going to be looking at potential landowners to work with for leasing, etc. So for us, I would say it's exclusively to determine if there's capacity at the beginning.
Great. Is that how most of you use them? Anybody use them any differently than that? Okay, hearing nothing.
Hi, this is Yoki.
Thanks, Yoki.
Hey, okay, yeah, I just wanted to note that, if more data was available on the public-facing map, and the data that is available from the pre-app on the maps that is also available in the pre-application report is used by public interest parties like IREC when evaluating the state of Xcel's system. So I just wanted to note that.
Okay, so it's kind of a supplemental use there to inform.
And so how do you use that then, Yoki?
Brian, maybe can chime in on this as well, but when we're looking at the system and trying to understand what is the configuration of the system and what likely constraints on the development of more distributed generation would be, having that data publicly available is helpful for that purpose.
Constraints and availability. Thank you.
This is Steve Coleman with Sundial. We have not been using the pre-application reports, relying more on the HCA map and the queue. But going forward, we anticipate using it for our understanding in an upcoming batch study where we will be trying to analyze an area of feeders and a substation to better be prepared during a batch study.
We've also heard from
Okay.
other developers. This is Beth. I had a question. We've heard from other developers kind of outside this meeting that it would, you know, from when we were asking about pre-application reports, in their mind, it would be helpful to have the map and the pre-app data together at the same time, because my impression from that would be that it would kind of turn around or like increase the efficiency and make it quicker to kind of help select sites because they have that pre-application data available.
All right, not hearing anyone else and knowing we have a lot to get through, our next little teaser question is, what value do pre-application reports add beyond capacity data? Or maybe they don't add any data, but I've heard from people that you're using them. So I would assume that you're getting some good value out of that.
Yeah, this is Chris Punt from Xcel. Just wanted to push on this one a little bit more, because this is definitely one where we've had some discussion. There's, you know, things in the pre-app that aren't in the hosting capacity map today. And so we're really trying to understand if some of those items are some of those really key. Do you need all of that? I know there's the desire to have as much, you know, as we can bring forward. But in the absence of us being able to do some of that, are there other ways, you know, potentially we could get you some of that information? Just trying to make sure that the hosting capacity map has those key pieces for you in whatever format that needs to be. So I think this is a really good question. We're really interested in, you know, what is essential for helping you understand whether you need to go forward or not.
This is Marty. Here, we don't use these pre-application reports. We definitely would if we were developing, you know, community solar or larger commercial projects where known congestion is. But we're really interested to see what, you know, if we're going to continue to see more and more impacts of feeder congestion for residential and small commercial projects, less than 40 kW, less than 100 kW, then a way to get this information quickly before you put in a lot of time and effort into, you know, design, you know, an interconnection. But I don't think it changes the impact much for these smaller projects, other than just make it take longer to get the same answer. So I'm trying to understand how these pre-application reports would give installers or developers of smaller systems in these highly congested rural areas any value, I guess is kind of a question I have.
This is Brian with IREC. I would think there's likely information on here, yeah, that would not be on the HCA, like whether there's a regulator upstream that needs to or potentially needs to be reconfigured depending on the size of the site. And so, you know, I think any of that information, you know, that could potentially trigger an upgrade would be useful for a developer to understand, you know, what are the potential, at least the buckets of which they would see, you know, upgrades or mitigations being proposed when they do go to interconnect, especially for larger projects that may be outside of the ICA levels.
But the reports include recent Xcel upgrades over the last, like a history of 10 or 20 years, whatever it is, as well as future planned improvements that don't have anything to do with DG?
Yeah, I mean, that could be some possibility there. The hosting capacity analysis is taking into account, what those changes are to the system, at least, in the last, with the last update, it's getting that information, but isn't necessarily going to tell you, yeah, 3 years from now, there's a plan on this feeder to, upgrade the conductor or whatever it is. There is some of that information available in our integrated distribution plan. So there is that potential, but there's always that piece too. Plans change. It's a pretty dynamic budget, but it could potentially help there as well. Just give a little more insight.
Okay.
Hi,
well,
this is Yoki.
Oh,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to observe. Thanks. I just wanted to observe that, the commission ordered Xcel to provide significantly more of the data that's typically available in the pre-application report on the map starting November 1st. And if we want to continue this discussion in a little more detail, it might be helpful to have a list of the data that Xcel will not be providing on the map starting November 1st, and then we can go through that, those data fields and talk about how they would be useful. But it sounds like we're almost done with the time here, but that seems like that might be a good way to continue this conversation.
So we do have that list, and maybe we'll continue through the brainstorm conversation here. And if we need to, we can pull that up over time as we go. Does that sound good?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. I'm going to go to our next little trigger question to get us thinking. We're looking for some real life success stories about pre-application reports and what worked well to enable that success. Does anybody have like a specific use case that they could share? There's got to be one out there. Okay, well, not hearing anything. We'll go to kind of the flip side. What are some frustrations or concerns that might be resolved through hosting capacity information integration into the pre-application report process? Any stories or frustrations there? I know some of you have had them because I see them.
This is Steve Coleman. Without a description of what this HCA integration would look like, I feel I might not have enough information to answer this question. It's obvious that if the HCA integration provides certain things like the customer receives primary or secondary voltage service, so that doesn't have to go on one line or site plans, and also stuff like that, and the size of the size of transformers and different trip and qualities of the overcurrent protection just be automatically put in there. Well, yeah, that would be handy.
there's a portion of the initial screens, sorry, this is Marty. There's a portion of initial screens that talk about interconnections on secondary shared transformers greater than 20 kW. And when you have a, when you're applying for a system for interconnection, it appears that we have to wait, 60 days or whatever it is. It takes forever, it seems, to see that it fails an initial screen, all because it's on a secondary shared transformer in the system. This is arbitrarily greater than 20 kW, which requires supplemental review. I don't know if there's a way to tether and have that information available through the HCA, so that you can put a project directly into supplemental review. And so this is a little bit of how they connect with MNDIP, but it just seems like all parties could avoid, a 60-day wait on something as silly as knowing that it's going to go into supplemental review anyways. So I think there's some other stories like that where combining the two would speed and smooth out the process.
Thank you, and we'll be exploring that more later in this workshop.
All right, well, now we're gonna switch into an interactive format, and I'm just going to switch my screen sharing quick, so please hang on for just a second. Let me take it out of this one, into here, and find, oh, sorry, wrong link. And now I lost my link, so please hang on for just a sec. All right, so this is where you start talking about the ideas that you have for how we could improve the initial report screens through integrating with hosting capacity information or analysis data. And so does anyone have any ideas to start with that come to mind? Things you would like to see as you go from current state to ideal state?
Carrie, I think something's not quite right on the viewing because I'm not seeing your screen.
Thank you, Mary. Let me try this again. New share, screen one. Are you seeing it now, Mary?
Yoki, while we're trying to.
No, we're not seeing it, Carrie.
All right, I'll try again.
While we're trying to get that up, this is Yoki. I just want to mention that, I think, ideally we'd be, looking at all of these screens that are in the MNDIP and seeing to what extent does the hosting capacity software and methodology already evaluate if that, particular problem will exist on the distribution system, and if the hosting capacity software is able to or already does, perform that evaluation, then looking at if it would be necessary to, if it would be possible to just use the value provided by the hosting capacity analysis instead of the screen that is in the procedures as they are now. So I think that answers your question.
That's a great question and thought.
Go ahead. I
was just going to say, that's a great question and thought. We're still considering, this first portion is mostly discussing the pre-application report, but we will be discussing the the actual screening process itself again later on in this workshop. But I'll just quickly say that we have been looking over the comparisons and similarities between the hosting capacity process and screening process, and we are currently working to see if there are any crossover there that the hosting capacity process could help aid the interconnection screening process, or seeing what criteria is usable by both processes. So does that help kind of follow up there, Yoki?
Yeah, that sounds good. Looking forward to the point when we get to that conversation here.
Sounds good.
I
Looks
see
like
we've
we
got
also
a
have a
question in the chat. Steve is asking if the pre-application report is integrated with the hosting capacity. Would the report be provided without cost? And I think we've talked a little bit about that last time. You know, we think that there seems to be a desire to have some free option. So it just kind of depends, I think, on what the end result looks like. And maybe there's some kind of, you know, free version that has certain information, and then some other version that has more information. We really don't know at this point. So definitely that's an open consideration.
All right, so it's one potential feature then, a free or lower cost version. Are there other integrations? Like, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to suggest what is our attendees' thoughts on the current method of applying for a pre-application report through the Salesforce portal versus other ideal methods of application that you would like to, or methods of request that you would find better, and how that would relate to hosting capacity, whether it's through the map itself or, again, sort of a combined process. Do people have any thoughts?
So then, let's see, if you don't have thoughts on the process and how it works today, can we take that as that process is working well for you today as far as the actual process itself? Or do you have suggestions for things that you'd like to see work differently?
This is Marty here. Again, I don't have any experience applying and requesting these because we currently do not do it for small scale on-site projects. But it appears we'll need to start doing that in some cases to ensure we don't get months down the road well into the design to find out there was never any room to begin with. So I'm interested to see how, but I need some help with that. I don't know how this process can help with it. Sure. And why it would be valuable or even economical given the budgets, you know, and timelines of smaller scale projects. The smaller scale projects don't really have the time or the budgets, you know, to add more time and add more cost. So it's more of a question, I guess, than a suggestion, but I am interested in finding a way to provide value there. I just don't know how.
So Marty, would you say that a key value for you in that case would be the ability to see that generation capacity in the hosting capacity analysis in a format that it would provide most benefit for you in a free format, since you do not seem to need some of the other information in the pre-application report? Is that a good way to summarize your thought?
Yeah, and to take it a step further, some of the companies that are spending major marketing, you know, funds, you know, don't market around that feeder in Chisago. You know, I mean, that's a clear value add. That's not necessarily our problem, but I do see that being a value add in those cases.
Is there a subset of details that currently are delivered through the pre-application screen or report that would be super valuable if you could get them right away beyond what's in the hosting capacity report, but maybe not the full pre-application report? Like if there's a light version?
I think so. Maybe All Energy could comment on this as well. Or Sundial. Steve, you may want to comment here too. I just don't know enough about the information provided, the cost and the timeline to see if it provides value. But yes, if this information was able to tell us there's only 5 kW of potential and the customer wants a 20, of course that would be just as valuable to that customer as a CSG developer knowing that there's 500 kW versus a megawatt of capacity. There's different expectations for different projects and customers. So a light version, I think, would be very helpful.
To follow up, Marty, Steve from Sundial here. Some of the, we're not reviewing potential sites. We're always reacting to sites, clients, and on-site generation. So what is available at a site? And one concern with the hosting report that I put in the chat there is 15 days from a request to a reply is a 3-week delay, and clients don't like to wait the heck long to understand whether they can even apply there or if it's got some restrictions that are discoverable through this report. In short, we need to take clients' interests and turn that into an application in less than 15 days. So right off the bat, I'm going to rely more on the interconnection queue and available information rather than risk multiple applications getting ahead of me and creating DG on that feeder or substation that will put me into sequential review. And that turns out to be a very long wait. So sequential review on top of 3 weeks, client getting 5, 6 to 10 weeks delays to get this information. It's a non-starter in many ways, and that's why we haven't been using it. Going forward, we have opportunities where there will be multiple on, say, a feeder or a substation, and I think obviously there's a little more information that could be sought there, but we've been burned by applications getting in 1 or 2 weeks ahead of us and forcing a project into a 6 to 10 week delay because of it in sequential review. And that's not a risk I can take.
Steve, this is Mary Santori. Totally understand everything you said. So I'm wondering, as we look at that 15-day, what would be reasonable? I mean, I'm assuming it's something a little more than instantaneous, right?
Well, instantaneous would be great, and if this whole thing is integrated, I think that's which is readily available is likely to be close, very, very quick. I won't say instantaneously. 5 days is the outside that I would want to wait for something like that. From my point of view, for a call it a 100 kilowatt system on a roof in the Twin Cities, if I have to delay choices about what we're going to propose while waiting for a hosting capacity pre-application report, that messes with timelines that matter.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, does that timeline sound about right? 5 days on outside?
From a solar garden perspective, that would be really nice. The 15 business days is a little bit long, and it does take a little while to, while you're waiting for other deadlines. It'd just be nice if it was a little bit quicker than 15 days.
Okay, and then if there were to be a different set of deliverables or something that would be turned that quickly, what are the most essential components that are needed? Any ideas? And again, this isn't necessarily committing to anything. This is just getting ideas out there so that we understand the universe of the needs a little bit better. Like queue is important, right? Because that kind of lets you know if you're going to get hung up in one of those long waits for sequential reviews. And then I heard Marty say remaining potential. Is there anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is the remaining potential would be helpful for us, assuming everything ahead in queue moves forward. There's, and some of these kind of semi-rural feeders, you got 5 megawatts of community solar stuck in front of a 5 kW backyard on-site array. If there was information that would lead to a major delay or an opportunity to speed up the on-site project, we discussed that in the MINDIP working group last week. Data that leads to that conclusion faster would be important.
So basically the schedule for prior and queue projects.
Yeah, but I think there's information, and you guys are already doing this, where you're moving on-site projects ahead, even though earlier projects have not been fully studied in the supplemental review or facility study process, because you see something on your feeder that says it's no problem, this on-site array can move forward, it will not affect anything ahead in queue. Whatever that data is would be helpful here. We know that you're doing that in some cases, but we don't know what you're seeing in order to make that conclusion. So to be fully transparent, if Xcel could provide that information in these screens, then we could all be on the same page. It's great to see an on-site project move forward, don't get me wrong. It'd be nice if we were both, looking at the same sheet there.
Great, thanks for that clarification there, Marty. All right, would it ever make sense to have different types of pre-application reports? A pre or lower cost version with a faster turnaround for the smaller projects? Seems like you're looking for less detail than maybe some of the larger projects or the CSGs. Does that idea give you anything to springboard off of as you think about this? And Steve, I'm grabbing your comments out of chat to include details and then the size, phase, and voltage of transformers. Are there any other details that aren't included today that you guys would really like to see included? No, how about the process? Is it, and we didn't get any thoughts on the process, but is it a pain to type things in and upload the photos, or is it working pretty well? Like, is it important to anyone if instead of, and this is a no promises thing, but if instead of having to upload a map to verify the location, you could just go straight from where you clicked on the hosting capacity map and click like a start application button, and it would integrate that location directly into the process. Is that important, or is that not a valuable feature or something you'd really ever, you know, want us to focus on as opposed to everything else?
This is Steve Coleman. That sounds like a convenient feature if it can be accurate enough. I have a little variance depending on where my cursor point is on the hosting capacity map. I get different feeders. I get different neighborhood selections around there. I would, if it's going to be accurate enough, yes, the GPS location seems more accurate to me.
That's a good thought. And I have captured that. So I'm not hearing that that's necessarily something super important to folks. All right. Anything else? Any changes, integration with hosting capacity to the pre-application report that you'd love to see in your wildest dreams? This is the time to get it out here. Otherwise, we'll keep moving on. Okay, well, we've got about 50 minutes remaining, so we're going to keep booking then. I'm going to flip back to the deck, and we will go on to the next category, which is the MNDIP initial review. And I'm going to go back into presentation remote mode. Now, as a reminder, this is after you fill out the application, you go into the initial review screen if you have a qualifying project. This includes the simplified initial screens and the fast track initial engineering screens. And so I'm going to give you just a second to just level set on what's involved with these screens by looking at this information. And sometimes it's kind of tricky to figure out, you know, what goes into fast track initial engineering screens versus fast track supplemental screens and what qualifies for fast track at all. And so I included this additional detail here at the bottom just to make it easy for you to see that. Okay, now that we have a good idea for what's going on there, we're going to take another poll. Just really quickly, this one is looking at the application volumes and your expectations for those for interconnection applications over the next, in the current state annually, and then what you anticipate to happen over the next, you know, 1 to 3 to 5 years. so we can kind of tell what we're planning for. And I do really appreciate you guys participating in these polls. It's very helpful to us to know kind of the different perspectives that are coming to the table and the voices that we're hearing in this conversation. Okay, I'm not seeing much input from the developer community so far on how frequently you're submitting interconnection applications. I'd like to see a little more there, please.
Could you explain the difference between in the question 3, there's fast turnaround and quick and easy to request? Is quick and easy to request implying the needed modifications are quick and easy to request? Whereas fast turnaround is
quick and easy
getting the results?
To request. Yeah, sorry for that ambiguity there. Quick and easy to request means the application process. It's quick and easy to submit an interconnection application.
Oh. Gotcha, thanks.
Are you implying by all options other than accuracy would mean that the other avenues would produce less accuracy?
I think it's more in relation to top priority of, obviously accuracy is a top priority, but maybe your pain point with any screening or study processes is it costs too much, it takes too long to turn around, et cetera. Maybe you're satisfied with accuracy and you want to see more security or something like that.
By making accuracy an option, I just think it kind of skews and throws off the question and the results. I don't have a suggestion on how you might ask that question differently, so don't take it for what it's worth. It's a very difficult question to answer with one answer.
Yeah, it's just trying to get just a casual feel for, you know, how this all plays out, because, you know, at some point you could engineer it forever, right? And to get to the absolute best accuracy. Or is ballpark accuracy in a reasonable time frame a better balance? So this is just helpful for us to get a ballpark of what are the issues that are on your mind as you're looking at this. We know that if we put all of the above, everyone would say all the above. So by trying to force into at least one, we get a feel for what is most important out of all of these.
This is Mary Santori. I'll just add one thing. One of the things we're trying to do as we put together this roadmap is, you know, where are the first places we should go? We know accuracy of our system, really, we've relied on for reliability and safety. It's a whole new world. Everyone on this call knows that, right? And we're relying on the data that we have for our distribution system to help us to different solutions. But we don't have it all right now. So we are going to have to invest in gathering that data. And that's sort of where that question came from. You know, if that is the top priority for people, then we would, you know, as we start to look at the roadmap, say, okay, what will it take to gather all that info and get it all in the system? I don't know if that helps.
Okay, thanks, Mary. So just a quick view of the poll results. Most people use these fairly frequently, which makes sense because you're applying for projects. That's what the process does. And anticipate that we'll see some pretty good growth over the next 2 to 3 years. So that's great news. Top priority, fast turnaround, and accuracy. So that just helps us keep those things in mind as well. So we're going to go now. Sorry, I always forget that doesn't change the poll. So this is what the MNDIP says about the initial review. We're not going to read this in detail. I think most of you are pretty familiar with the MNDIP, but keep in mind that there's the MNDIP process, and then there's the HCA integration into the MNDIP process, which is really the focus of what we're trying to talk about and brainstorm around today. So as you glance through this and lean in close to take a quick look and get a reminder of what these initial reviews are and what they involve, think about, are there opportunities to make it better and work better for you by using hosting capacity information and integrating that into this process rather than having them be separate processes. This is what an initial review example of what you get out of the initial review looks like. Can you still hear me?
Barely, Carrie.
Got it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That sounds great.
Uh-oh.
Would there ever be a way, Carrie, to...
Okay, now can you hear me?
Carrie, we can hear you fine. Are you able to hear me? Okay, I think Carrie now is having sound issues.
Sorry, I'm having some audio troubles. Can somebody confirm if you can hear me? Got it. I think I figured it out. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, Carrie, we can hear you. Or can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you. Sorry, my earphones died, so I had to switch over to computer audio, and I had it on mute so that I wasn't hearing echo. Great, so now you've all had enough time to look through what's in the initial review. We'll go one more screen of outputs here, so you can see the types of requirements and information that's being provided coming out of this initial review.
And I think Marty may have had a question in the middle of all this.
Awesome, thanks. Go ahead, Marty.
Is there ever a chance that you can put developers and installers in the driver's seat to complete these initial reviews ourselves? In a basic input, output, kind of online calculator kind of way?
How would you suggest that would, I think that's an interesting idea, but how would you suggest feeder or system specific information be entered on the developer side if they're not, if they're entering their own data or kind of using it as a calculator?
Yeah, I mean, through the address and account premise meter number, I don't know the answer to that question,
Sure.
But through, if we can provide account premise, meter address, all the basic information we do, as well as AC system size, can that ping Xcel's records to bring up a pass-fail scenario?
Understood. Thank you. That's a very good suggestion.
I don't know if others could comment on that, All Energy or Steve, if you think that would be helpful or not. It would save us a fair amount of time in designing something that has no chance of moving forward anyways. So I think it would be valuable, but I don't want to speak for everybody else.
This is Danielle from All Energy Solar. I think that is an interesting idea, and it could prove to be helpful, especially if other projects ahead of the one we're looking to submit is already in supplemental review or on hold. Yeah.
So a follow-up question, and this again might be discussed later in this workshop, but that form of automation would be most helpful, and would you want to see that? Would it be a high priority to those on the call to see that in things like the screens or in the pre-application reports? Is that sort of automation valuable, and could you kind of explain more on that?
Well, I think it's huge, both time saving for installers and developers, as well as all of you managing a queue. You guys know how much garbage is in the queue to begin with. And what's the point in applying for things if you know it's not going to go forward anyways? I think it cleans up the entire system. It decreases the number of applications that will go nowhere because this automation would give us the information to save all that time and energy and money and focus on switches that can be flipped. There's also there's an additional psyche side of this, that nobody likes to be placed on hold, especially by their utility. And so I guess in a way, we're putting ourselves on hold because we fill it out and we get the outputs, and it is what it is. When we're told we're on hold with no information, oftentimes it's a little different.
So I agree that no one likes to be on hold. And I think that's a conundrum that's being contemplated in the DG work group. And unless we have ideas for how the hosting capacity data integration could help us identify or proceed beyond that hold process, I think we'll table that topic and focus in on ideas for improvement for this phase of the step with hosting capacity and integration, if that makes sense. But I love the ideas that you've thrown out here. I've kind of broken it out into two different topics. Does that feel about right?
Yeah, and my point there, Carrie, is that this is so far upstream of all of those other issues. I think it solves a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
So that's more of a benefit that you see coming out of this?
Self-serve templates in getting the initial screen information back on our own time, kind of at our leisure, to be included in our own processes as needed, is so far upstream than all of the other major issues that we're having in the MinDip process. I just think it cleans a lot of that up.
I have one follow-up question or discussion point. Would be, how would you see that interacting with the hosting capacity process itself, as that could also be interpreted as a non-hosting capacity related topic? I think Yoki mentioned earlier his interest in finding out what areas of hosting capacity and the screening process have crossover. But are there any additional thoughts there?
I see them as the same because the initials, they're working off the same information. Am I wrong there?
They share some information, I would say, but their current processes follow different avenues, if that makes sense. But maybe that's a discussion for another time, or I'd ask Chris Punt too, if he's on the call, to add there, or Ed Shannon.
So has anyone had frustrations with the initial report screens that might be addressed through the integration of the hosting capacity data? I think what I was hearing from Marty was, you know, self-serve templates is kind of a how, and it's kind of a speed issue and convenience, right? Is the what you're really trying to achieve.
Well, but Carrie, keep in mind that in order to get through the initial screens, we need to submit one-line diagrams, site plans, all of that design work. Whereas if we could integrate hosting capacity data with a self-serve initial screen or template, then we can enter in just the information necessary, the basics, to get the initial screen results. It doesn't require a site plan and a one-line diagram and an on-site designer visit. We can enter in the basics, apply that towards the hosting capacity information, and if we get, you know, thumbs up in all categories, then we move on to actual engineering documents and submit for interconnection. That's how I'm envisioning this.
This is Chris Punt. Sorry, I've been having some issues with network connectivity. I think one thing that we should probably point out here too, and Marty, maybe you're not as familiar with hosting capacity analysis, but kind of the way that is performed and some of the assumptions that go into it. It is more focused on large interconnections, and that has kind of been the direction that it's headed the last few years. That's not to say we can't supplement that information with other things that could be valuable on a smaller scale. And I think that's what we really have to think about, because the analysis itself is probably not going to give you what you need in the end, but maybe there's other things that we can incorporate and work through to help give you at least that a little bit more.
All right, any other ideas here before we move on?
Hi, this is Yoki. As I said in the chat box a couple minutes ago, we only have limited time remaining on the call, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to hear from Xcel and have a discussion about each screen and if Xcel is that the HCA software sufficiently evaluates the constraint the screen's designed to test for. Thank you.
So we did not have the facilitation model teed up to proceed like that, Yoki. We were going through this model to get the feedback requested. So we aren't really in a good position to proceed as you've requested.
The other thing that I would add, Yoki, this is Jody, is that we're not kind of, I guess, bounding the analysis that we're doing by our current tools. So to the extent we want to go in a certain direction, we would be looking at what are the tools needed to go in that direction. So not necessarily relying on, drive and synergy in their current roles as they are today.
We absolutely take your feedback. This is Luther Miller from distribution. We take the feedback and understand that trying to find those common points and criteria would be valuable in terms of speeding up either process. So
could Xcel commit to including that information in the report that's filed on November 1st with an evaluation of each screen in the MDIP process now, and if the software that's available sufficiently evaluates the constraint? Because I had requested on previous calls, we have that conversation here today on this call, and I asked Brian, our engineer, to join us for that purpose, and I never received feedback from Xcel that that was something that we wouldn't be able to do. So this is kind of surprising to me that we're not able to have this conversation now.
Yeah, I think, Yoki, we've been planning to have a higher level discussion about where everybody wants this to go and how they see these things integrating in the future. And we're not feeling necessarily locked into those current softwares and tools and processes and all of that. So we'll be addressing all of this feedback as part of our analysis in the November report, but I'm not in a position to say today that we're going to have a detailed analysis of how well Drive or Synergy or any other tool could perform the kinds of features that that we're hearing from people or that we think may make sense in terms of a roadmap.
So this is Brian with IREC. I think the ask or idea from our side would be to replace as much of the initial review process with a simple check against the HCA values, and that, without having that deeper level conversation, it would be hard to say exactly what steps it would integrate at and exactly how it would integrate. But something like replacing the 15% screen with some check against the HCA value would be probably a first step, and then see if there are other screens that that value or a value in the HCA could be pointed to, rather than the screen itself as it lies today.
absolutely, and we appreciate that feedback.
I would also just add that, the whole reason why the construct of hosting capacity analysis was created in the first place, as I understand it, was to serve as a replacement for the penetration screen that Brian mentioned of 15%, and to be able to provide a more detailed look at a location on the feeder that might enable the interconnection of projects where there is greater than 15% penetration based on capacity value, to let some projects move through in a fast track process. And so, considering that was kind of where the genesis of the hosting capacity analysis came from in the first place, it really seems like that's a conversation that we should be prepared to have today.
So if I understand what IREC is saying, then you guys are hoping that part of the integration with hosting capacity, these capabilities that we're looking at, you would like that hosting capacity to have the 15% screen, so that you can go to the map and then evaluate whether there's 15% penetration or higher.
This is Brian. No, not quite. That basically that screen would be replaced with a reference to the HCA values, assuming that the HCA values and how they're determined is actually a better representation of the system than the 15% number.
So the HCA values, isn't that just how much hosting capacity is available? Isn't that something we already show?
Right, yeah, so this would be an improvement to the screening process, not to the HCA that I'm referencing.
Okay, did you guys follow that, Chris and Mary?
Yep. So that would be
Chris did, then he'll help me.
a min-dip discussion as well. I mean, is what that would probably end up leading towards, changing the requirements for, what that initial review screen is needing to accomplish.
Yes, absolutely. It would be looking at, replacing some of the kind of more conservative rule of thumb screens that are currently in the NDIP with more location specific analysis from the HCA. As we've seen, California is, moving towards removing the limits on the size limits on fast track and replacing the 15% screen with the results of the hosting capacity maps. And that's the kind of direction and the long-term goal that we were looking at here as well. I was hoping we could talk about more than just that screen, because I think, Drive is a fairly robust tool and has the potential, to evaluate, potentially at a more granular and accurate level, some of the other things that the MDIP screens were designed to test for.
So I'm going to step in with where Carrie's been going. Others and how you feel about that? Anybody have other thoughts on that? And thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, is that something you want us to be looking at?
Yes.
So Carrie, I think we should probably keep moving on our agenda here.
Yep, I think so. So going into the supplemental review, here's what comes out of a supplemental review. Just giving you a few minutes to look at this. And then in the interest of keeping timing going, we'll prompt you through these and we'll go back to here and go to the supplemental review screens. And any new ideas that you think could be relevant here. Or please let me know as well if there's carryover from prior ideas that you want to capture here.
But this is Brian. I think, same comment as before in terms of integrating the HCA into the screening process.
Great, can do. Okay, I'll just retype that. Sorry, I'm having a computer issue apparently. There.
And Eddie, you had brought up this comment about the further upstream answers can be provided, the better it would be for both sides. And is that like, especially related to constraints, right? Or things that would complicate the study process? Maybe he's one of the folks that doesn't have audio.
This is Isabel at Fresh Energy. I'll jump in if he's trying to unmute or change the headset. Apologies if I'm interrupting anybody, but I just wanted to chime in also and say, I think both of these things are really important and are goals that the Commission has already expressed in terms of moving long-term toward better integrating interconnection and the hosting capacity analysis. And I think a lot of us are, looking for areas of efficiency between the two processes. And I think exactly what Brian said is really important in terms of replacing some of the work being done in initial and supplemental screens with references to the hosting capacity map and or report, since a lot of the relevant data is already provided. I think the more we can do that, the better, and would love an opportunity to, talk at some point about how that could happen for each of the specific screens that we're talking about.
Okay, are there any other ideas that you guys want to bring to the table now before we move on to just think about soup to nuts, the full interconnection process, to make sure that we're not missing any ideas along the way? Any big frustrations that you think could be further resolved here? I think, we've talked about some great ideas to deal with, like some of the speed concerns, some of the timing of when you find out that you're running into big hiccups that are going to impact your project costs or timeline. Think about maybe queues. Is queue information great the way it is, or does that play into this somehow in a way that would be really valuable? I'm just trying to think through what else are pain points that could be resolved through better integration of the data that we have available.
There's an accuracy issue in some cases where projects are sent into supplemental review erroneously because of a prior error on a failed initial screen. So to what extent the HCA data can eliminate those errors is very important.
Thanks, Marty. I also heard here screen based on less information. And is there potential to do that? Anybody else? Any other great ideas floating out there in your mind? Like, oh, if I was Xcel, I would do it this way.
One more thing to add here, Carrie, is that I know in the Mendip meeting, Xcel was heavily scrutinized for timelines, and all of these timelines could be shortened through full integration and also putting installers, developers in the driver's seat for some of these screens or reviews. If there's limited resources on the utility side, but there is mass urgency on the developer installer side, it may work out to integrate to the portion that to the extent that these are automated. No more waiting 15 days if we can just go in and do it and move something forward ourselves.
Yeah, to build on what Marty was saying there, this is Steve. If integration of the HCA and the initial screens can be done in an automated way within a 5-day period of being accepted complete, maybe the supplemental screen can change from a 6-week or 30-day process to the 15 or 20-day process that is in there for the initial screens. Just kind of use the automation to eliminate one of these potential steps and take this very long supplemental screen period. And if it's needed, try to get that done in what had been the initial screens.
This is Yoki again. The idea with replacing the screens against checks with HCA values is that there wouldn't be any time necessary. It would be, the values that are published on the map would be used, as a check. And as long as the, project is smaller than the value published on the map, then, evaluation under that screen would not, a different type of evaluation under that screen would not be necessary, just to clarify.
That is what I understand. But if it's doing it automatically and then, what was written there, use that timing for what had been it. And if those values automatically let it go through, it's through. That seems like an opportunity to avoid a 6-week period. That seems good to me. And maybe not always, but sometimes.
Okay, we're down to about 15 minutes left. Any more ideas here before we move into the full interconnection process? So this is where you think about, from the very beginning to the very end. Is there any other potential integration points that could be useful for saving time, saving money, giving you better information earlier, helping to avoid pitfalls that you've run into along the way? Really think holistically as we think about this to make sure that we're capturing all the ideas that might be floating around in your head. Again, think about, if I was Xcel doing this, I would integrate it this way to make it so much easier for everybody using the system or going through the interconnection process.
Could the supplemental screens be wrapped into the initial screens? They're similar studies, just more elaborate, but to do them at the same time would save the engineers time, and then the developers would get results faster as well.
And just to clarify that, or I would ask the group, if those screens were to be combined in that way, it would certainly save time for those screens that would require both the initial and a supplemental screen. But there would be the potential for a downside for those projects that only require the initial screen. So does the group have any thoughts there just to discuss?
But like I said earlier, there's some projects that we know are going to supplemental review anyways.
Sure.
So we might as well just get them there. And what Danielle mentioned is looping those two together would make a lot of sense for those projects. Where Yoki mentioned before, the opportunity to eliminate some of these checks by using the HCA data is important, and may be able to eliminate some of the initial screens or make that a installer developer process somehow. All of this provides flexibility, which results in a more consistent construction schedule, which is huge in Minnesota given winter, but also just the sales and marketing cycle that is constantly changing. In our case, we go outside of Xcel territory to get projects to bring forward quicker to keep construction schedules consistent. And if we had more control over the timeline, not just speeding it up, but the flexibility to, pull things forward as necessary within Xcel territory, it would provide a smoother, a faster process for everybody. So I'd say I don't like wrapping in both of the screens together for all projects, but certainly for many of them, it makes total sense.
Sounds good. Thank you.
This is Steve Coleman. It's not necessarily HCA related, but of the full interconnection process, the timeline that can grow out of the initiating an application and getting it accepted as complete. Some improvements in there where, if there's notes about bookkeeping issues or housekeeping issues on plans, making sure the boilerplate of direction of CTs or primary, secondary are on the plan and may inadvertently not get on there. A way to avoid repeated 5 and 10 day delays in just having an application accepted. That would be an area of improvement we would love to see at Sundial.
Okay, so that was completeness reviews. I was having a bit of a hard time hearing you. But completeness reviews, you're trying to avoid multiple review cycles by what?
Well, in completeness review, there is at least 3 different, as I understand it, 3 different looks by parts of Xcel for program acceptance, and then 2 engineers review different parts of it. Can that be made into one holistic review, out of which, if the notes are not significant, but there may be notes, it be accepted as a complete application, and the notes need to be updated in further versions of the documents? Trust that, if there's a list of these 10 notes, and then it's accepted for completeness review, trust that the developer or the submitter will make those changes as long as they're relatively simple and not go to the core of, is this a 100 or a 1,000 kilowatt application? Same place, all of this, the loss of the failure to put in the words no overhead obstructions being used as an opportunity to force another 5 or 10 day period in the process seems onerous. That's what I'm trying to relay. If the note could be made and the project accepted, the document updated and re-uploaded and go into accepted application.
Okay, I think I've captured your idea.
Yes, I like that note.
All right. Any other ideas? We've gotten some good ideas going, I think, about ways to integrate back and forth. I just wanted to bring up one more topic, unless there's more questions on the holistic interconnection process, which is fine if there are, keep bringing them up. But I also want to, I need to quick do a, there we go. We've cruised through a bunch of this. Before we get into what's next, I wanted to talk about quickly, like doing some of the things that we're talking about would be a pretty big lift in terms of level of effort and in terms of the cost to do that. And I wanted to get your ideas on how those costs are recovered and what your thoughts were about some models for potentially doing that. Anybody have ideas to begin with? What about like the idea of doing prepaid subscriptions, or do you like paying as you go for these different things?
Hi, this is Yoki. I'd like to say that we think the HCA should remain a tool that is free and available for all users, including public interest groups, to access.
Okay. Any other concerns or process changes or anything about the costs and how they're funded and how we kind of, if there's work up front to make things available, how we spread costs out over time through usage fees or anything like that?
This is Brian with IREC. I'm not sure if it gets to exactly your question, but in some places they are already doing or looking at utilizing, I think it's an application fee, and maybe Yoki knows more about an application fee to kind of fund upgrades that would be necessary, such for smaller projects, so that a smaller project doesn't get hit with a $2 million upgrade of something just because they hit a certain threshold and they were the last person in. So it's more of a socialization of the upgrade costs across the applicants.
So basically, that's kind of a different thing, and I'm going to pop that in as a different idea so we don't use it. It's basically like a application fee fund for system upgrades for small projects, something like that.
Yeah. So the way that we've seen it work elsewhere is that for all small projects, pay a uniform fee that is representative of the average costs of system upgrades over the past year. And therefore, there's not one small project that's responsible to pay for a single large upgrade, but all small projects are kind of pitch in towards the cost of projects to continue to connect.
Okay, and I think that idea, it's a great idea. I think it kind of falls outside of the scope of this work group and kind of flips into that MINDIP work group, because it's a different way to address how cost causation and system upgrades are allocated. But good input, got it captured, and we'll flip it over to that conversation if that's okay. Okay, and with that, we're at 2 minutes. Jody, do you want to wrap up? Are you feeling like we have what we need here?
I will talk fast. Thank you, Carrie. Well, we really appreciate everyone's engagement today. This is the last workshop in this series that's gathering input for our analysis of several potential future hosting capacity use cases that we are going to include in our November 2020 hosting capacity filing. You have given us a lot to think about, and we've definitely got our work cut out for us with that use case analysis. So thank you very much. Can you move to the next? So our hosting capacity filing will include the typical outputs. So there'll be tabular results, heat map formats. There'll be some, additional functionalities this year. I think Yoki mentioned some of those things that the commission asked us to do will be there. There'll be summaries of all of these workshops that we've had and our analysis of these use cases in addition to, many other things. On this next slide, we've got Paget's email address so that you can, if you think of something after we're done here today, you can feel free to shoot it to Paget via email, and we'll be sure to get that included to the extent possible. So please do that. I also want to remind everyone, we sent out a survey yesterday after the workshop number 5, and so would ask that all of you complete that survey as soon as possible so that we can also include that in our analysis. So I'll just do a very quick pause here because we are at time to see if anyone has any final questions or input to offer. And if not, thank you very much for attending today, and this concludes our workshop.
Thanks everyone for your ideas and participation.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.